It's really an honor to be here with you today. 1 year ago today, at the International Coffee Organization meeting, Roberto Velez, CEO of the Colombia Coffee Growers Federation, asked a question. How can anyone expect to have a future in coffee if coffee growers can hardly make a living? Let me ask that again. How can anyone, me, you, any of the thousands of people at the convention this weekend, expect to have a future in coffee if coffee growers can hardly make a living? Velez and many others have answered this question with, we have to pay farmers more. I'm here to share a story about how we found this same question and very similar answers in Rwanda. My story is about how we discovered what was really happening on the farms, the empowering evidence was gathered, and results have already happened because we provided this evidence to Rwanda's policymakers. So let me start with a little background. Coffee is important in Rwanda. It is the leading agricultural export, contributing 20% of foreign direct investment. There are 350,000 farmers in Rwanda, but without data on these farmers, the government had some serious blind spots as to the precariousness of the status quo. So because of this, we want to go back to 2001 when Rwanda's coffee story started. They had a conversion from commodity coffee to specialty grade coffee. This transformation as part of the genocide recovery years is one of the proud success stories of our industry. They went from 0 to 250 coffee washing stations. Price of exportable green went from $2.50 per kilogram to consistently above $3 per kilogram. This is what we call Rwanda's coffee renaissance. However, there were some stubborn problems causing deep concern. We looked to some ICO data for some key indicators. Rwanda's coffee production is on a downward trend, falling 50% over the last 25 years. Elsewhere in the region, Arabica production is growing. Ethiopia, for example. Rwanda's other big problem, potato taste defect. This defect is named for the taste of raw potato that shows up in the cup seemingly randomly. It's related to attacks from a pest, the Antestia bug, and I won't go into further detail on the defect other than to share that some estimate Rwanda's losses due to potato taste in the millions of dollars annually. So against this backdrop, in 2014, the Rwandan government decided to take action. In summer 2015, the Africa Great Lakes Coffee Project, the one I'm here to tell you about, was launched. Our objectives were two. First, we wanted to get at the root causes of potato taste and improve farmer productivity. So we had a twofold hypothesis. First, that we suspected that if farmer motivation could be increased, two things would happen: increased productivity and reduced incidence of Antestia. And we could measure how these two factors are related. Second hypothesis is that an improved policy environment will lead to increased farmer investments and increased productivity. In other words, we posited that the policy-making process could be reformed to a more evidence-based approach. So to really understand potato taste, we needed to understand what was happening on Rwanda's farms. This required focused fieldwork. We did a baseline survey of 1,024 farmer interviews. We did focus groups, and all of this was across 4 of Rwanda's key coffee growing districts. We took the baseline data into discussions and presentations in policy roundtables with stakeholders from across Rwanda's coffee sector. These aspects deserve some highlights because this is a different approach than other research groups addressing the potato taste problem. So let me share now the empirical evidence, the results. First, I'm going to show you some cost of production data. That's in the background of a lot of the work. And then you'll see the 3 tools that we provided to Rwanda's policymakers. So our first key metric is a conservative estimate of cost of production. It is 177 Rwandan franc per kilogram cherry. It has 4 components: household labor, wage labor, purchased inputs like fertilizer, and purchased equipment. Next, we take cost of production and look at it by number of trees. So on the y-axis, we have the value of cost of production. On the x-axis, we have farms grouped by size. And when we plot the curve, you see the expected inverse relationship. Smallholders have high cost of production, large holders have low cost of production. And when you overlay a line for the price, now you can clearly see smallholders have costs way above the price. Only larger farms have costs below the price. So because we have this cost and revenue data, we can calculate gross margins for all of the farmers in our sample. And with that, we create our first model, a model of farmer profitability. Here, the y-axis is percent of farmers with losses. And the x-axis is this range of hypothetical cherry prices. So it allows us to see how, of course, at low prices, a large percentage of farmers have losses. We also show the complementary percent of farmers with profits in green. And this figure, policymakers could see how the 2015 price of 170, 38% of farmers had losses. The next year, when the price went down to 150, 45% of farmers had losses. And even those in the green profitable, 55%, they're hardly making anything because the line between red and green in this model is only break even. This is not sustainable. And so, of course, the policymakers ask, well, what should floor price be? And we had asked the farmers, and we asked them in our survey. And the farmers said, 300. That's the tipping point. And their comments were quite interesting as we asked this question. They would say things like, yeah, until the price is 300, I'm better off going to work on my neighbor's farm, earning a daily wage. So here we can see that a third of Rwanda's farmers are losing money every year on coffee. But that's not the end of the story. We had this data and we studied productivity, investments, capacity, and best practices. And the tables and statistics that we have on all of those studies are in the paper that I hope you'll have a chance to read. But with this further analysis, we were able to devise our second tool, a new typology of farmers. This model hinges on the concept that in high-performance agriculture, producers need 2 things, capacity and the incentive to invest. And we show in this model how these 2 forces interact in our low cherry price scenario. So we start with our 5 categories of farms by size and look first at the smallholders. They have the lowest capacity. They have the fewest trees, least paid labor, they're older, less educated, but they have the drive from necessity. They have the highest incentive to invest. For some of them, their coffee trees are their only source of cash for the whole year. So their productivity is 2.17 kilogram cherry per tree. Now we go over to the large holders. They have the highest capacity. They have the most trees, they have non-coffee income, and the most education. So they could give every tree top care, but our research shows they do not do this. Instead, they have the lowest productivity of all of these categories. At 1.0 kilogram cherry per tree, we know these trees are being neglected. But these farmers are commercially oriented. Their incentives come entirely from cherry price. So our model draws two curves. The capacity curve shows how large holders have the highest capacity. Small holders do not. Small holders have high incentive to invest, driven from necessity. But incentives from necessity decline as farms grow large, such that the large holders have no motivation in this low cherry price scenario. In other words, we have in this model the surprising understanding that small holders and large holders are struggling in coffee, but for different reasons. So let me introduce you to a large holder in Rwanda to try to understand what's really happening here. This is Evariste Habimana. He is the president of his cooperative, he has several businesses, and he owned 10,000 coffee trees. In 2012, when prices were low and his labor costs were going up, Mr. Habimana ripped out 2,500 trees. So he had 7,500 when I talked to him last season and asked, well, what are you going to do? And he said, if prices stay as low as they are at 170, I'll rip out all my trees. I think I'll do livestock instead. Mr. Habimana is a key actor in Rwanda's coffee sector, and he is this close to leaving it. We don't fault him, but his logical choices are an illustration of why Rwanda has production declines. So we use Mr. Habimana's story to create our third and final model. This model shows production of Rwanda's coffee by farm size and under low cherry price scenario. So we know they can achieve this. And we add to this a what-if scenario. Assuming all farmers in Rwanda could achieve that productivity level of the smallholders, the 2.17 kilogram cherry, they could achieve the amount in green, which would be a 52% increase, almost all of it coming from the large holders. So to summarize, our three models show why Rwanda has production declines. We have the profitability model, the incentives versus capacity model, and this final one showing the potential if large holders are motivated for huge increases. This is the evidence that with increased cherry prices, large holders are going to lead the turnaround in Rwanda's coffee sector. They will become full partners in Rwanda's coffee renaissance. And our results are not unlike that of other recent research. Chad already mentioned that according to the ICO, El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Colombia all face similar threats to long-term sustainability. And the research recommends increasing farm gate prices to improve farmer profitability. And this is the point where we need to ask, what about the people who buy the cherry? Are they going to be unprofitable? Will they become unsustainable with these higher prices? The answer is no, quite the opposite. This is a win-win situation. Buyers will reap the benefits of the increased volumes. But today, we're mostly only paying the floor price. This is a photograph of a farmer sales record last season showing she received the 150 per kilogram cherry. And exactly this, the data says, is not sustainable. So you might ask, what happened back in Rwanda to that data? Fortunately, over the past 6 months, the government has really understood the urgency. And they took this empowering evidence into the negotiations for the 2017 floor price. And those negotiations were tougher than ever. Meetings led to more meetings. Finally, exactly 2 months ago, the government announced new cherry floor price of 264 Rwandan franc per kilogram cherry. The season opened with farmers anticipating a 75% pay increase. Farmers in Rwanda are happy today. Mr. Habimana is also happy that he did not rip out all of his trees yet. And we, as the researchers, with these raised cherry prices, we expect farmers will be using more inputs, we will be measuring the productivity increases, and we'll be checking to see if our hypothesis about potato taste defect is supported. So I'd like to leave you with just a few thoughts today, things that I've learned. First, if something's not going right, check the incentives. They're probably off. Second, invest in evidence. Involve the stakeholders. Invest in an evidence-based dialogue with your stakeholders. And finally, to return to the words of Roberto Velez, I think he speaks not only for Colombia's coffee farmers, but also Rwanda's, when he says, we want coffee to be an attractive industry, an attractive business for everyone. Everyone. Thank you, and also want to thank my collaborators, especially Dan Clay. Thank you so much.